Raise your hand if you've ever been so down bad that you had to call on a medium to bring your old mentor back to life to ask him for advice. Me neither. All right, welcome back to my series where I rank the top 10 crash outs in the Bible. Today we are on number 6. We are moving through this list. You may not be familiar with the story, but I guarantee you are familiar with the person. Today we are going to talk about King Saul. Now you might be thinking, Tether, why didn't you just talk about Saul pursuing David from nation to nation and city to city? Why didn't you talk about him using his daughter Michal as collateral damage and saying, oh, David, if you give me 100 Philistine foreskins, then you can marry into this family. You can have my daughter. And David being like, that's a fantastic idea. I would love to be your son-in-law. Here are 200. And Saul thinking that 100 Philistines, of course, would take him out, and it didn't. Or you could talk about Saul using his son Jonathan as another last resort to take David out the game, because surely Jonathan would be on King Saul's side. I mean, obviously, when King Saul passes, Jonathan would then inherit the kingship, and Jonathan's response is, we're friends and I don't really see the big deal. Anyways, we get to this point, right? So there is this prophet named Samuel, who's a really big deal at the time. He is the one who originally anointed Saul as king when he was 30 years old. Now Saul reigned for 42 years, but he also was called to anoint David as king, as I mentioned in my previous video. And so at this point, Samuel has passed away. So Saul is at the end of his pursuit for David. I mean, he's still pursuing him, but he's fighting the Philistines as well, per usual. And Saul is asking God for help. He's asking God for advice, and God is on hush mode. And so he sees the Philistine camp and he's overwhelmed because of how vast they are. And he's like, you know what? He asked his servants to call up a medium. Now, this is important because Saul had outlawed mediums and spiritualists because divination is a sin against God. But he's like, I'm going to make a special exception for myself. And so he calls on the medium. King Saul's in disguise, so the medium doesn't know who she's dealing with at first, and she's like, I can get into trouble for this, and he's like, don't worry about it, I got you. So she was like, okay, well, who do you want? And he was like, Samuel. And she calls out Samuel, and when she sees Samuel, she is in shock and horror, and she was like, you're King Saul. And he was like, yeah, what do you see though? And she's like, I see an old man in a robe coming out from the earth in spirit form. And he's like, perfect, that's Samuel. And so he's like, bring him out. And so Samuel obviously is very disturbed and he's upset about this. And so we start with 1 Samuel 28, verse 15, where Samuel says, why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? And Saul said, I'm in serious trouble. The Philistines are fighting against me, and God has turned away from me. He doesn't answer me anymore, either through the prophets or in dreams. So I've been called on you to tell me what I should do. And Samuel's response is basically like, what's that got to do with me? What has that got to do with me? I am a prophet of the Lord. I mean, he didn't say this part, but he's like, the Lord is doing what he said he was going to do. He told me to tell you what he was going to do while I was still alive. Why are you calling me out of the dead to tell you the same thing? Listen, the Lord said that you are not going to have the kingship. It's going to be stripped away from you because you were not obedient to him. And tomorrow you're going to come and join me, and God is going to give the Israelite army to the Philistines. Now, this is a very short story. I mean, Saul obviously was very despondent. He was in disarray. He hadn't really eaten anyways, and it got so bad that even the medium was like, hey, I think you should eat something. And he's like, no, I'm not eating nothing. And his servants and the medium were like, no, seriously, you should eat something. He finally eats something. The prophecy is fulfilled. Saul ends up passing away. But I bring up this story because I think it's a really profound example of what to do when you're insecure. So Saul in the Bible, if you start from his entire reign over Israel, again, he reigned for 42 years. Whenever he was disobedient to God, it was because he cared more about how he was perceived by others versus how pleasing he was to God. So when God would tell him to do something, he would do half of it to make him look like a good king so he could still stay in the people's good graces. But he didn't fully carry out what God had said. And he's done this on several occasions where he's been like, well, I was afraid of the people. I was afraid of the people. That's something that is said several times in his story. And so I give him grace because, of course, Saul was the first king of the nation of Israel. So obviously he didn't want to upset the people. But at the same token, this is why God chose David. David, who was a mere shepherd's boy when he was anointed as king. I mean, he was a kid and he was the youngest of 8 sons, not even including daughters. He was the youngest of 8 sons. he had a heart for God. He was obedient to God. He listened to God, and God knew you could be trusted with this because you care more about what I have to say versus what other people have to say. So let this be a lesson to you. Number one, do not call on mediums to bring out dead people. Don't do that. Number two, when you are insecure, which is, I feel, a natural human emotion sometimes, you can bring it to God. You can submit it to God. I mean, even Moses was insecure, and he submitted it to God. He was like, God, if you don't come with me, I ain't going, because I know I can't do this by myself. To have a heart for God doesn't mean that you have to be perfect. It just means you have to be willing to tell him the truth, submit yourself to him, and let him do the rest. Thank you so much for joining me. This was number 6, number 7, number 8, number 9, and number 10 is posted above. We've gone through all of it. We're getting to crunch time. I can't wait to talk about number 5 tomorrow. I'll see you next time.